Hey dudes. It's evening, so the lighting is a bit weird, but I hope you forgive me. I'm a little bit tired, so excuse me for that. But I'm gonna be talking about part-time jobs in Norway, how to get one, basically. This is actually something that I can talk about because this is something that I know about. I have a part-time job, I've had another part-time job before, so we're gonna talk about that. We're just gonna talk about part-time jobs. And I have, I think, 3 notes before we start. Note number 1, I am Norwegian. I am Norwegian, I speak Norwegian, just so you know. So this is not from the perspective of a foreigner, this is just my perspective. Number 2, when I talk about these things, I'm gonna assume that work permission and language stuff, things like that, are in order. I'm not gonna get into visa stuff or work permissions or anything like that at all. I'm just gonna talk about the process as is. And I'm gonna assume you know enough Norwegian to navigate these things. Because if you have a question, do I need Norwegian to work in Norway? My short answer is gonna be yes. But we're gonna get more into that later. And then the last thing I wanna mention before I get started is that this does vary a bit by company and sort of by level. You know, entry-level part-time job is a bit different than getting like a highly paid, skilled worker type of job thing. A lot of the steps are similar, but this is from the perspective of a part-time job, and I'm gonna try to talk about it a bit like general. It's gonna be, you know, entry-level retail, supermarket, that kind of things, because that's what I have personally had. Like, those are my jobs. So yeah, those are my notes. And in this video, I'm first gonna talk about where to find the job, then I'm gonna talk about how you apply for a job and the process with that, and then lastly, I'm gonna talk about, I guess you could call it like administrative things, sort of like, you know, typical salary, when you get paid, sort of what kind of, like what work culture is a bit, I guess, for a part-time worker. Again, there's a lot of similarities between full-time and part-time when it's still entry-level, like retail, but I'm gonna assume part-time just because that's what I know personally. And I'm also gonna talk a little bit about what kind of jobs I envision you could have if you don't speak a lot of Norwegian. I highly recommend that you at least know the basics if you plan on working anywhere related to customers whatsoever. But there are some places, some fields where I meet more foreigners than in others. So I'm gonna get to that in the end. But first, where do you even find a job? So I'm assuming normal circumstances in the world, and I'm assuming you're here, and I'm assuming you want a part-time job to go along with whatever you're doing here in Norway, if it's studies or whatnot. Where do you even start to look? There's mainly 3 ways, I think, where people find a job. The first one is probably like the most common one, and that is going job hunting on one of the 2 sites that we use where we post job listings. These sites are finn.no and nav.no. There's a lot of cross posting, so you don't really have to check both, but I do kind of recommend checking both anyways. Both sites are in Norwegian, and I have not found an English version of them. I think there used to be one for now, but I couldn't find it last time I checked because the site changed. But even then, most of the job listings are going to be in Norwegian anyways, unless it's a foreign company who doesn't know Norwegian themselves. The job listings will be in Norwegian. And on these sites, you can filter by location, so you know, the city you're in or the city you want to be in. You can filter by part-time or full-time. You can filter by, what is it called? Sector is what it's called. You can also filter by sector, so you know, like, I don't know, woodworking, food, restaurant, hotel, retail, like those kinds of things. You can like filter that if you have a preferred business you'd like to be in. And then you'll just get like a long list with job listings, and you could just look at those and see if you find anything that suits what you're looking for. This is a very normal way for people to find a job listing when people are kind of generally looking. People might be like, oh, I want to work in a store, or I want to work as a teacher, or I want to work in healthcare. So they'll go to this site, look for open positions in their area near them or an area where they want to go, and then they'll apply. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Let's move on. A second method is a method that I am personally not that big of a fan of because I don't really think it's that effective. But this is the method that most older people will tell you is definitely the way to go. And that is just going into the store and asking if they have anything available. And preferably bring your resume and your cover letter as well. So this is definitely the thing that my parents tell me, or my grandparents will tell me if I'm looking for a job and they know that. They'll be like, oh, you just take your resume and you go to the store and you like introduce yourself and ask if they have anything available. And this was probably the way it works back in the day. And this is probably more effective if it's a self-owned store, like if it's like a private store. Basically, if the boss who's there can make a decision on their own, then, you know, it's probably more effective. But these days, a lot of stores belong to chains, which have procedures within the company and how to do things. And very often, like, you know, HQ have to approve of new hires. And also these days, a lot of companies would want you to use their own personal application platform for like job hunting or whatever. Maybe I'm just being negative, this is just my opinion, but I just don't think it's that effective because if there is no opening for a job, you're not going to get a job. And if there is an opening, a lot of the time, even if they have people who have been to the store and like introduced themselves and all of that stuff, even then, if they have candidates that they could call, they're probably gonna put up a job listing anyway, just to make sure that they get like, you know, every possible candidate in so that they can decide whoever they want the most. But there are a lot of people who still do it this way. I work in retail, so regularly, like a few times a month, there will be someone coming in with a resume and a cover letter, and they'll be like, could you give this to your boss? I'm looking for a job. And I'm always like, uh-huh. And I also check the emails at work, and there's a decent amount of people who are like sending in the cover letter and their resume and just being like a general inquiry about work. So what's my point here? My point is, if you have a specific place you want to work, then you can totally do this, and you might be lucky and they might have an opening. But I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket. I would try to actually look at places that actually need people as well, and not just hope that the place you want happens to need one, because you might have to wait a while. Or you could get lucky, you know. And so the last method that I want to talk about of how to find a job is probably the one that is most difficult if you don't have a network in Norway already, and that is word of mouth. Not surprising, right? If you know someone who knows someone, it's always easier to just get an in, get, you know, the first kind of contact going. And also you will be a little bit less anonymous because you will be a friend of someone they know, and they'll just kind of link you with that in their head. So this is probably the most like effective way, because you both have an open position and you have something that makes you a bit more recognizable. But it's probably also the hardest one to get. I don't know if I need to explain this, but you know, you have friends, you have family, you just kind of give out the word that I'm looking for a job if anyone sees anything, if anyone hears anything. This way you might be able to apply before there ever is a job posting, because job postings for part-time jobs, especially in big cities, get a lot of applications. When you get like several hundred applications for a part-time job, working once a week and every other Saturday, I think that's a lot. That's a lot of competition to beat out. So yeah, that's how you find a job. Okay, so now what? You found X amount of job listings, you want to apply to them. How do you do that? Well, it varies, and I know you don't like that answer because it's not specific enough, but it really is hard to say that you do this specific thing because it depends. So generally speaking, you contact the boss. If it's a job listing, there will be contact info either in the posting or like on the site. So that's easy enough. In those cases, you send your cover letter and your resume. We actually don't call them that though. Cover letter we call basically application, søknad. That's, you know, where you talk about yourself, why you want the job, what you think you can do for the job, those kinds of things. It's a cover letter, but we call it søknad, which translates to application, I guess. So we usually send that, and then we also send a resume. In Norway we call it CV. It's that Latin word that you know, that I can't pronounce, but we call it CV. We just use the letters, and that's basically just a page that lists your education, like your school and your previous work experience and maybe special skills and contact info, those kinds of things. It's not very personal. It's supposed to just be like an easy overview so they can say if you've had similar work experiences before, and your references should also be listed on there. In most cases, that's all you need. There's an email, you'll send those to that email, and then if they like you, they're gonna call you back. If you use the method where you go to a store, they'll either accept it in the store, a printed copy, or they'll ask you to send it by email. So for the one I work at, hiring is usually a pretty like local thing. So the boss in any store can sort of just decide who they want to hire or not. The HQ doesn't really get involved with it. They get involved when you need to make a contract because you have to send in documentation to them for that. I also know that they sort of have a standardized process with questions for interviews and stuff like that. But overall, it's a pretty simple process. The boss just decides, okay, I like this one, I'll have this one. However, there are lots of stores that have their own application platform. So basically they have their own website where you go to apply, and whatever you have to do and answer and stuff, that's gonna vary depending on the site. A lot of the time is, you know, you upload your resume and you write your cover letter directly into their application portal. Maybe you have to upload a picture, maybe you have to answer like a questionnaire, maybe you have to do a personality test. The boyfriend applied to a bunch of jobs when we were moving to Bergen, and he's done personality tests, questionnaires, but he also had to do one where he basically had to do his own video interview. Like there was a bunch of questions, and then he had to answer those questions while filming himself and then uploading it to the site. And that was a bit weird because that's not that normal, but yeah, they had that. It's not really complicated. It's just some places have more hoops, some places have you do a lot more before they'll even actually talk to you. But you know, when all of that is over, however they wanted you to, you've sent your resume, you sent your cover letter and all those things, and they decided that we like this one. That's when they'll call you to an interview. And again, It probably varies, but typically interviews are just going to be one-on-one. So you and the manager. It's not super uncommon though for it to be you and the manager and maybe like a manager higher up. Or if there's like a store manager, but then there's also like a general manager. You might meet 2 people at an interview, you might meet 1. And group interviews I don't think are normal. But I'm pretty sure the boyfriend went to at least 1. But yeah, I don't think group interviews are common. Not every place will have you do an interview though. My very first job, I just put in my application and then a week passed, I think. And then she called me and she's like, you want to start on Monday? So there I actually didn't have an interview at all. I did talk to her a little bit when I gave her, because then at that time, I think I gave her a physical copy of my cover letter and stuff. But yeah, there was no interview there. But I did interview for both my jobs in retail, so it's pretty normal, I think. And ta-da, you got the job. What happens next? Again, it depends, but you're supposed to sign a contract. You'll sign a contract and you might be given like a manual of what's required of you and what you have like access to from them, those kinds of things. This really does depend though. A lot of places will have courses that you have to take. In retail, I've taken like product courses, routine courses. Those are taken online. They can't force you to do it at home if you don't get paid, by the way, but typically they'll ask you to do it anyways, and most people don't argue about it. When I worked in a grocery store, there was also courses, but that was more about like routines, how to handle these kinds of things, what policies do we have, how do we meet the customers with these kinds of problems, those kinds of courses. And if you work in a shopping mall, you'll almost definitely 100% have to do a fire safety course. I had to take those both the malls that I worked at. I'm assuming you have to do that everywhere. It's basically just what you're supposed to do in case of fire or in case of emergencies. And then you'll probably be set up for some hours of training. I don't know if this is something everyone has to do, but for all of my jobs, there's been like some hours of training. I think 3 times 4 hours is a relatively normal amount. So basically you have 3 days of training, 4 hours each, which is kind of a short shift, but it's not supposed to be like a full work day. It's supposed to be, you're there with other people who have worked there longer and they'll tell you how to do things. And yeah, then you're at work. Congratulations. Okay, so a little bit about I guess administrative things. I'm gonna talk about money because I know you want to know this, right? How is the pay when you have a part-time job in Norway? Entry-level part-time job. So Norway does not have an official minimum wage. It's actually negotiated per sector, and retail I don't think has like one minimal wage. But I'm gonna give you a number because I know you want one. And I'm gonna give you the number 160 Norwegian kroner. So 160, you can convert that into your own currency yourself because it changes all the time. And you might think that that's incredibly high. And actually I personally think it is pretty high. Not like you don't get rich on it, but it's pretty good. So 160, it's technically like maybe 162 or 159. Like it depends a bit, but that's not a major difference. So yeah, I'm gonna say 160 just so you have like something to base it on. And that's per hour. And then most places, or at the very least most decent places, give you extra money for working what we call ubeleilig arbeidstid, which is basically evenings and weekends. I need to stop scratching. I'm getting really pink and it looks weird. I will say 160 is like a pretty standard number for entry-level starting jobs if you're over 18. It will increase with age in Norway, typically. We don't really have... I think there's seniority based on how long you work in places, but it starts usually with seniority based on age. And then I think how long you work there can come on top of that, but that really depends, I think. Personal opinion, like working a Saturday evening is usually kind of lucrative pay-wise. But again, that depends on where you work. I know some places don't pay anything extra for working evenings or weekends, and I think that's not so nice because it's not a great time to be at work. The normal is to get paid once a month, and you get paid for, a month's worth of work. Now, where I work, that's not actually the first until the last of the month. It's usually something like the 25th to the 25th gets paid on the last day of the month. And the reason for this is basically that the few extra days between, say, the 25th and the last of the month, those extra days are just there for processing purposes. So, a month with work and then a salary. It's nice. Taxes are automatically taken out of your salary for the most part, I think. Unless you do something weird with it on purpose, they are automatically calculated and taken away. There's more stuff I could talk about, like salary-wise and tax-wise, but I really don't want to, so we're just gonna skip that, and I'm gonna go to another thing that I know people want to know. Where can I work if I don't speak Norwegian? Because people ask. My DMs are a mess. I really want to give the advice that you should just learn some Norwegian, but I know that learning languages isn't easy. I know because I'm learning, several at the same time, and I personally think it's fun and it's, you know, great, but it's not easy, so I get that. But if you're gonna work anywhere related to customers, you really should. And a lot of places and a lot of job listings will have the text that says you have to be proficient in Norwegian, both written and spoken, and also very often English as well. But there are some type sectors, businesses, places where I've met more foreigners than other places, and it makes sense. So I'm gonna tell you about those. First of all, retail, no. Off the top of my head, I actually cannot remember going to like a retail store, like just, you know, normal shopping anywhere, and meeting someone there that did not speak Norwegian. I'm sure there exist some, but I typically don't go into a retail store and meet someone who doesn't speak Norwegian at all. Like, that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that you can't have an accent. I'm not saying you have to be fluent or native to work in retail, but I've never met someone in retail that I had to switch to English with. So, you know, I don't think that's the right place for you to go if you don't want to learn Norwegian, or if you just haven't started at all and you want the job now. So we're just gonna put that aside. Retail, you should be able to communicate, because there's a lot of issues that can come up in retail with returns, with angry customers, or customers needing more help, or product information, all those things. You're gonna have to be able to get through that. So if you don't speak Norwegian at all, we're gonna put retail to the side. But where could you potentially work then if you can't work in retail? Because retail is like a lot. A lot of the entry-level stuff is retail. Well, you have grocery stores and supermarkets, and you're gonna have to know some Norwegian anyways. Because again, I've never met someone there who didn't speak any Norwegian, and also the cash register, menus, labels, everything is written in Norwegian, so you're gonna have to be able to at least comprehend it somewhat okay. But in grocery stores, I have had colleagues who don't speak great Norwegian. There's been a lot of accents, there's been a lot of interesting communications, let's just put it that way. And also, grocery stores are kind of a place where you have typically set phrases of communication. So, you know, you need a bag, or you're part of the membership club, do you want your receipt? You basically need to know what things are, so, you know, vocabulary, and that phrase, do you have, or where can I find, or can you show me where? Blah blah blah. Customer-wise, I don't think working in a grocery store would be the hardest thing. It would probably be more difficult to communicate with your colleagues and to properly get things done. I'm saying this based on experience. I've had colleagues who are not super proficient in Norwegian, or rather, the major problem wasn't the ones that weren't that good in Norwegian, it was the ones who didn't realize that they weren't that good in Norwegian. So they would tell me something, or I would tell them something, and they'd be like, yes, I understand, and then they didn't. I think that if you are at a passable level of Norwegian, a grocery store is probably going to be fine. I think the administrative things are going to be the most difficult in that setting. But if you learn the phrases, and if you just learn the vocabulary related to it, I think it could happen. I mean, it definitely does happen. I've met many people in grocery stores and supermarkets who are not that good in Norwegian, so it's probably fine. I do meet a lot of not so proficient foreigners in driving type jobs, you know, like taxi, bus, truck drivers. Well, actually, I don't meet a lot of truck drivers, but I know that that's also a place where you'll meet a lot of foreigners. I don't think this is super relevant to people coming here, for example, to study though, because that's not really a part-time job. So we're gonna skip that. No, it's an option, but we're gonna skip it. I think the last one I want to talk about is like hotel and restaurants and those kinds of things. Those are usually grouped together because that is one sector. I actually think waiters are the ones that I've personally encountered the most that know the least Norwegian. So I guess that would probably be your best bet to find a restaurant or something like that. I don't think I've seen a lot of foreigners in cafes. Cafes? Man, I'm struggling with my pronunciations today. I don't know why. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe I haven't seen them. But I feel like I see a lot more foreigners in restaurants than I do in cafes. In hotels, like receptions, you might meet people who are not super proficient in Norwegian. But yeah, I think maybe waiting, servers, those kinds of things might be the best bet if you don't speak it much. I've actually had like a server in a restaurant who didn't speak Norwegian like at all, but that wasn't great because I was out with my dad's aunt and her family, and she does not speak Norwegian. No, wait, she does. She totally does. She does not speak English because she's, you know, kind of old. And the waiter, it was his first day. Oh, poor soul. Oh, I felt so bad for him. It was his first day. He didn't speak Norwegian yet. I'm assuming there was an expectation for him to learn it, like pick it up. But it was his first day, so he probably hadn't been in Norway for very long. And she ordered, and she was like talking to him, and he didn't understand. And then she got a little frustrated because she couldn't speak English. And then he got her order wrong. And it was just a little bit like she wasn't mad. She didn't get mad. She didn't like curse him out. She didn't call him filthy foreigner or anything something like that. She was very nice about it, but she did say that, you know, as an older woman who never needed or had the opportunity to properly learn English, it's a bit frustrating for her to go to a restaurant, and it was kind of a nice restaurant as well, in her own town, in her own country, and not be able to speak her own language. But again, I think that was just kind of a mix of bad circumstances, because it was his first day, and I felt so bad for him. Like, we were nice to him about it, and he was nice about it, and it all worked out. He didn't get yelled at by anyone, but it was just the terror in his eyes when she waved him over and was like, this is not the food that I ordered, and he just went, no. Anyways, I didn't have a script, I didn't even have bullet points for this, so if it's a bit messy, I apologize. If you have any questions, let me know and I'll try to answer them. I just want to say one thing before I go, and that is that I will not do job hunting for you. I'm really, really sorry, but I do not have the time or the will to do that. I just wanted to say that up front, because, you know. Anyways, I hope it was helpful. I know the last section probably wasn't too helpful, like about where you could work and stuff. I was just trying to give some information based on my own observations. So I hope that at least it gave you an idea of where you might be able to get work while you're not super proficient. But overall, I hope it was kind of helpful or informative. I hope you liked it. Yeah, that's about it. I'm gonna go now. Again, if you have questions, leave it in the comments. I'll try to respond and get back to them in a timely manner. And yeah. Subscribe for more videos. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.